Hello, and welcome to a Meet the Candidates series for Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District, hosted by the Chamber Coalition of Dakota County, representing the Apple Valley, Burnsville, Hastings, Lakeville, and River Heights Chambers of Commerce. My name is Colleen Roth, President of the River Heights Chamber of Commerce, and a special welcome to our guest partner, the Savage Chamber. Each candidate will be asked the same set of questions on topics of interest from the local business community. The interviews are recorded and will be posted on dakotacountychambers.com and on all chamber partner websites. In this segment, we will hear from DFL candidate Representative Angie Craig. Our interviewer is Blois Olson, political contributor with WCCO Radio and CEO of Fluence Media. Blois, thank you for being here. Let's begin.
Welcome to the first conversation in 2nd Congressional District race in Minnesota. Tonight, here on News Talk 830 WCCO, my guest is Representative Angie Craig. Our debates, forums, and conversations this election season are presented by AARP of Minnesota, Minnesota's corn growers, and Minnesota's credit unions. And I want to thank the Coalition of Dakota County Chambers for making this partnership possible. Representative Craig, thanks for joining me.
It's great to be here, Blois.
What in the opening comments here would you like to let listeners and viewers know about you as a member of Congress and this campaign?
Well, hi, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Angie Craig, and I'm so proud to be with you here tonight. I'm even more proud to represent Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District and those strong partnerships that we've been able to create over the last 4 years with our local businesses and with our local chambers. You know, our community has been through a lot over the last 2+ years, and I want to tell you a little bit about what I've done during the course of the challenges. I've strongly supported the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the bipartisan Paycheck Protection Program, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund to help out our local businesses. And as a result, we have saved so many businesses. No doubt challenges remain, but it doesn't help or solve problems to play the blame game. That's why I'm focused on solutions and working across the aisle. Blois, the former president, signed 4 of my bills into law. And I'm ranked in the top 3% of all bipartisan members of Congress, according to Common Ground Committee. I've pushed congressional leadership on legislation to lower prescription drug costs, fought policies that would hurt family farmers, and I've led efforts to ban members of Congress from trading stocks. There's one other economic issue that I got to raise here as we get into our discussion today. The Supreme Court has rolled back nearly 50 years of legal precedent and taken away reproductive rights for millions of Americans. And last week, Republicans in Congress introduced legislation that would ban abortion nationwide at 15 weeks and send doctors to prison if they perform this care, even in Minnesota. My opponent in this race, Tyler Kistner, said late last week that this legislation seems reasonable to him. Let me be clear, no government, no politician has any place in the decision between a woman, her family, and her doctor. Tyler Kistner is too extreme for our congressional district. I voted twice to codify Roe versus Wade into law, and I will do everything in my power to protect reproductive rights. And with that, thank you again so much for having me, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Representative Craig. We'll try to keep all the answers here to 3 minutes. And you raised your opponent's name, and I think, you know, with all of the discussion and dialogue of this, we'll get into kind of the issues of the business community. But, you know, on August 31st, your campaign put out a press release that said that you invited Tyler Kistner to participate in a series of, quote, debates leading up to Election Day. Representative Craig, we tried to offer a debate so that you guys could debate issues like a woman's right to choose. Why did you choose not to do a debate, but rather an interview today?
Well, we do a number of different formats for a number of audiences, Blois. And I think even last cycle, you and I sat down for beers in preparation for the election. So we certainly had a live debate sitting side by side at Farm Fest. Tonight, we'll have a forum. There's lots of different formats, and we get a lot of requests. We can't take them all.
Great. So workforce is one of the issues businesses are challenged by. Billions of dollars in student loan debt. Our education system continues to encourage higher education that isn't directly tied to career choices that are able to pay loans. 92% of student loans are backed by the federal government. Should there be a policy change to ensure that student loans are tied to income potential for career demand fields?
Well, I don't think that's the solution, Blois. I think the solution is we need to refocus our education system. Number one, we have to focus on why is higher education so expensive to begin with? And number two, why are we trying to convince every kid that they need to go to a 4-year college in order to be successful? I have 4 boys, many of you know that. 3 of them have chosen the traditional college route. My son Josh, he's a machinist and he's doing absolutely great. You know, workforce availability was a key issue when I was on the executive team at St. Jude Medical all those years ago. And that's why we had such partnerships, public-private partnerships with technical colleges, with community colleges, because I fundamentally believe we've got to create the right job skills for the jobs that are available in our communities. Programs like that in the 2nd District, which offer pathways to different careers, I think are incredibly important. Look, that's why I introduced the 21st Century Workforce Partnerships Act. This is a bill that would provide grant dollars to those public-private partnerships that I have experience with in the private sector so that we can build out those programs and give these kids choices again. Look, the bottom line is we've got to focus on the real issue, and that's how do we make sure that college is affordable, that there's a level playing field for everyone, but the cost of college has gotten too high. We've sold a bill of goods to too many students that this is the only path for you. And that's one of the reasons why, as a mother, I want to be a strong proponent for career skills and technical education as a member of Congress.
Do you support the president's loan forgiveness? And some of your colleagues have called for permanent and total forgiveness of student loans. Where do you stand on that?
That's never been my platform at all, Blois. Look, the president issued an executive order. It didn't come before the Congress. It'll provide a little bit of debt relief, but I think the bigger issue is really why is the cost of a 4-year degree so expensive in our country? And I think we have to get after that question in the Congress, and that's where I'm going to be focused.
Thank you. Next topic is crime. Local businesses have seen dramatic increase in crime, from break-ins to catalytic converter theft, shoplifting, stealing of prescription drugs. What can the federal government do to help on issues related to crime and homelessness and drug addiction that are plaguing our communities right now?
Well, Blois, you're absolutely right that supporting law enforcement and their efforts toward public safety is one of the most important roles of a U.S. representative. And that is a responsibility that I take incredibly seriously. During my time in Congress, I've advocated fiercely to support local law enforcement. In fact, advocated so strongly that I took a position in opposition to the Minneapolis ballot initiative to eliminate the Minneapolis Police Department. I felt very, very strongly that I needed to call it what it was, which was just a really bad idea. It's why I have voted to fund the police time and time again. And it's why I keep pushing my Democratic colleagues in Washington to better understand the challenges that our local police departments are facing, and especially over the last several years. We've got to address crime and secure public safety. And doing that means we have to equip law enforcement with the resources they need. Look, I've spent years, 4 years now, building relationships with local law enforcement in the 2nd District of Minnesota and asking just that question: how can I support you at the federal level? I'm very proud that I've been endorsed by Dakota County Sheriff Tim Leslie. That's really reflective of all the work that we've done together. Specifically, I've been a strong champion of COPS grants, of burn grants. In fact, I have 4 cities right now in the 2nd District that I am advocating to the DOJ for 5 police officers for every single one of those departments to fund those police officers. You know, first, I'll just say 3 more things, boys. One, I am so committed to working aggressively, as I have in the past, to make sure that I'm finding all of those grant dollars. There are new programs, though, that Congressman Dean Phillips and I are really advocating strongly for. One is the Invest to Protect Act, which would be a new grant program for small and medium-sized police departments. The next is Pathways to Policing, which is a bill led by Congressman Phillips as well, that would give us a pipeline of new officers. That's one of the big challenges inside the community of law enforcement right now. Second, I'm going to keep pushing for federal funding to be distributed at the local level. I fundamentally believe, as we looked at these dollars that have come back to Minnesota over the last couple of years, that our county commissioners, our city councils have the best view and visibility of how that money needs to be spent. And then I'll end with this. I'm going to keep up the drumbeat and fight publicly against knee-jerk reactions and responses that demonize all law enforcement out there. We have to go back to a place in this country where we don't form judgments immediately, that the rhetoric has to be toned down a little bit. And I've been willing to call out my Democratic colleagues as well when I don't think that they're doing the right thing. And that's what I'm going to keep doing, boys.
Congresswoman, the next topic is inflation. Obviously, spending over the last 4 years has been unprecedented due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but businesses are starting to really feel the impacts of inflation at a high rate, including the national debt. If reelected, would you support efforts to move towards a balanced federal budget? And what specific proposals do you have to kind of put a cap on inflation right now?
Well, boys, thank you. Yes, I would support those fiscally responsible efforts. And in fact, we just put a down payment on that promise here when we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which is going to, by the end of the decade, save about $300 billion in federal funding. You know, we've had some really tough decisions to make over the course of this pandemic, both with this administration and with the previous administration. Unemployment in this country was 10%. Businesses were just shuttered and shattered, and we had to act. And I would just remind everyone that we acted on a bipartisan basis in the previous Congress as well. The Fed has acknowledged at this point that they moved too slowly. They didn't recognize that inflation was growing quite as fast as it was, but they also recognized that this isn't a US issue. This is a global issue. And the preponderance of that impact has been caused by a disruption in our supply chains. And certainly we've seen the impact that that's had on working families. I know that there is real pain out there. I've been asking this administration, and I do think that there has been some progress, but if you go back, I was sending letters 6-7 months ago to the administration, asking them to release more oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I was asking them to allow for year-round sales of E15 or ethanol. And in the short run, I've also advocated, and we can talk energy if you want to later, for additional oil and gas drilling in the United States as we accelerate America's energy independence by moving more toward renewable energy. You know, at the end of the day, I don't think that our country can continue to be held hostage by authoritarian regimes like Russia when they invaded the Ukraine. So every day I've been working on this. The year-round sales of E15 bill. I'm the first member of Congress to get that across the finish line in support of family farmers. And again, lowering costs is really important. The Inflation Reduction Act will lower the cost of prescription drugs. It will cap senior cost at $2,000 a year. It contained a $35 cap, my bill on insulin, $35 a month for Medicare and Medicaid patients. And, you know, we've seen support for the Inflation Reduction Act from a number of former IRS commissioners and former Treasury secretaries, as well as folks from both parties when it comes to top economists who do believe that this is going to put downward pressure on inflation. And I'll just, my final thought here is that, you know, my opponent, Tyler Kistner, has spent months complaining about the issue of inflation, but I haven't seen any real plans from him on how to address it. And in fact, he called inflation something that every Republican is benefiting from. Look, this isn't about politics. It's not about, you know, who wins the next election. This is about working families, and I'm going to stay focused on solving problems.
Representative, in that effort to try to cover as many topics here, let's try to keep our answers to 3 minutes rather than 5. Given low unemployment, issues with bottlenecks to immigrants at our borders, do you advocate specifically what for at the federal level to help deal with immigration and integrate immigrants into our country and our workforce?
Boys, our immigration system is broken. We all know that. And it's broken somewhat because for political purposes, it's not convenient to solve the problem. 2013, that Senate bill was a good example of bipartisan support for immigration reform. I believe that we have got to invest in border security, but we also have to make sure that we have a system that people can come here legally and get through. As long as the system is broken, people are going to attempt to go around this system. I'm glad to see the administration working to deal with some of the root causes of migration from South American countries, but I really believe that we need a comprehensive approach here. It's something that I hear every single day, especially for farmers in my congressional district. The Workforce Modernization Act is a bill that I supported and voted for in the Congress, which would allow additional H-2A ag workers year-round in the country. And, you know, producers like pork producers and turkey growers and others, they need that labor desperately. So I think we've got to have a system where we have a humane immigration system, protects our borders, an efficient system where it doesn't take 7 years to legally come into our country until we can come together and do something similar to the 2013 Senate immigration bill and stop using immigrants for political purposes. It is going to be a very challenging situation.
One of the final topics we want to discuss is supply chain. There's been obviously more awareness of supply chain now than ever before. If reelected, what can be done at the federal level on returning manufacturing in the United States, making sure that businesses and consumers have access to the products that they need without bottlenecks in the supply chain?
Well, we need to incentivize companies to diversify their supply chains and manufacture in the U.S. again. And I'll start with the CHIPS bill, which passed the U.S. House of Representatives, the Senate, and has been signed into law. Chip manufacturing is coming back to America, and it's really, really critical that we do that. Earlier this year, besides the CHIP bill, I also supported the Ocean Shipping Reform Act. That got those containers out of the ports, and it got the backlog somewhat going better. But at the end of the day, there are things we can do, but we've got to diversify our supply chain as well. You think about the meat processing sector during COVID. There are 4 meat processors in America. All of them are owned by foreign companies. We passed a bill, the Strengthening the Ag and Food Supply Chain, which would give make a new department at the White House that would consolidate some of this work. But we also passed a bill that would incentivize our family farmers and our ranchers to start small meat processing facilities. So, as I've said before, look, my opponent, Tyler, he's done a lot of complaining about supply chains. He's done a lot of complaining about inflation, but I just don't see any real solutions out there. And I've been very, very honored to be in the fight with our local businesses. I know there's pain out there, and that's why I'm working on all of these bills that I've talked about tonight.
Representative Craig, before you give your closing statement, I want to thank you for joining us. The forums, conversations, and debates on WCCO Radio are sponsored by Minnesota Corn Growers, AARP Minnesota, and Minnesota's credit unions. Representative Craig, just so you know, the invite still remains to meet face-to-face on WCCO Radio with Tyler Kistner, and then we don't have to just reference him in these interviews, and he doesn't have to reference you. You can talk to each other. And with that, I'd give you your 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Well, thank you so much, Lois. Let me start by thanking the Chamber Coalition of Dakota County for giving us the opportunity tonight. It's clear that voters have a very important choice coming up in November. Over these past 2 years, I have worked with so many of you on legislation that literally helped to save small businesses and to create programs that give capital to other businesses to start living their American dream. I've also proposed legislation at the federal level to reduce the federal tax rate from 21 to 18% for our small businesses here across America. I've championed career skills and technical education in our nation, and I've worked to lower the cost of healthcare. I've also proven that I'll work with anyone with a good idea, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, and that's why I've been named in the top 3% of all bipartisan members of Congress by Common Ground Committee. The simple fact is that Tyler's policies are too extreme for this district. He said he would have voted against the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the ARPA money to our counties and our cities that so many of you got grants from. He would have voted against the Inflation Reduction Act that lowers the cost of healthcare and moves us toward energy independence. He has touted inflation as something that is helping Republicans at the ballot box instead of coming up with policy ideas to actually address the issues. He's called for raising the potential for raising the age for Social Security and Medicare, something we should look at. And he called a national abortion ban bill just introduced last week in the Congress reasonable. As your federal representative, I will always protect your rights, your freedoms, and your privacy. I will always stand up to help businesses grow and prosper. And I consider you as a partner in these efforts. I'm proud to support funding our police and honored to have the endorsement for my reelection from Dakota County Sheriff Tim Leslie. Thank you again from this Washington, D.C. location for this opportunity, and I look forward to earning your vote.
Thanks, Representative Craig. Just to be clear, the legislation that Representative Craig references is a ban after 15 weeks introduced by Senator Lindsey Graham. And it will be debated and discussed widely throughout. And we'll ask Tyler Kistner about that in our next interview. I'm Blois Olson. Thanks for joining on this candidate conversation with Representative Angie Craig, presented by AARP Minnesota, Minnesota's credit unions, and Minnesota corn growers. When we come back on News Talks WCCO, Tyler Kistner.
Thank you, Blois, and thank you to our candidate, Congresswoman Angie Craig, for participating in Meet the Candidates series with our Chamber Coalition of Dakota County, representing Apple Valley, Burnsville, Hastings, Lakeville, and River Heights Chambers of Commerce, and our guest partner, the Savage Chamber. As a reminder, all three candidates are being recorded and will be posted on dakotacountychambers.com and our partner chamber websites. My name is Ed Carney, president of Apple Valley Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of my chamber partners, I want to remind you to please cast your vote in the general election on November 8th. It's that important. Thank you.